the I Make a Difference podcast, an adventure of exploration of your human self, the conditioned and unhealed parts of you, and your true self, the natural, real and powerful you. A pathway where you unravel, heal and uncover on your journey back to you. Oh my gosh, I've just had a whole week of torrential rain and winds, and that has reduced my ability to be able to provide an I'm Mad podcast episode earlier on in this week, because all you would have heard was this incredible wind and it was almost like hail that was coming down from the sky for most of the time. And then, based on where I live, we have the power go out, not just once, but twice. So the joys of what can hinder you being able to fulfill your responsibilities. But I'm here, and finally I get to actually complete this, or not complete, actually start and then complete this week's episode of the I Make a Difference podcast. And thank you for joining me as we go on our adventure exploring our soul self, our true self, and our human self on our journey back to our soul self, and identifying and working with and knowing what to do about unraveling parts of ourselves that are limiting and hindering us from being our true self, and being able to heal and work with those parts of us that are hurt, that absolutely need our nurturing, our love, and most importantly, our acceptance. I'm your host, Melinda Cates. And this week's episode, we are going to explore, we're going to continue on from the last two episodes and explore, where does self-responsibility and responsibility fit in terms of your soul self? And one of the key questions that came to my mind was, does self-responsibility and responsibility even exist in the world of our soul? Because if responsibility is about the commitments that you have and that you choose to fulfill to someone or something, and it's a quality and a state of being responsible, and it is something you have a direct influence over, where you are reliable and dependable, then responsibility as a process would not be labelled responsibility in our soul world. Because why do you need to talk about responsibility when you actually naturally know what to do, what is yours, and what is the right thing to do, and the right thing to do by you? And our souls are connected. And if our souls are connected, then all of our souls know what to do, when, with whom, and why. It's completely innate to us and completely natural. And it's not natural to us as human beings because we're not connected to our soul self fully. We don't listen to it, we don't trust it, and we become separated from it. And the choices our soul makes, which essentially is the choices we make before we enter human form, is responsibilities that we choose for our human experience. Because if as our soul we choose the families we agreed to be connected to, and we chose the connections and the experiences we have with each other in human form, then as a soul we're responsible for our human journey and the choices we make and made to have as a human being. Responsible in that we were the ones that actually chose this adventure and these experiences. So if we chose them, then why do we not take responsibility for our adventure? Why do we not take responsibility for the experiences that we have? And even more importantly, why do we not accept our journey? Why do we not accept the emotional processing we go through, the pain and the uncomfortableness, as well as the joy and the wonder and the awesomeness that we get to experience in human form? It's because in human form, when we detached from our soul, we began to not be self-responsible. We moved away from what was natural to us. We learn not to take responsibility and to also potentially be over-responsible. And we may have even been learning to be irresponsible and even negligent. And we also learn to be responsible and self-responsible. But why would you need to learn to be self-responsible and responsible if, as a soul, these are natural processes to us and they're not just labelled as such? We have to learn about self-responsibility and responsibility in human form, which is pretty crazy when you think about it, given it's completely natural to us and completely innate to us. And why do we need to learn? Because we unlearnt these natural aspects to us by learning not to take responsibility or to be over-responsible. And where do we learn these processes from? Well, the people who we grew up around, whom we were conditioned by due to their human conditioning. People who were potentially over-responsible, and they did not support or allow us to be responsible because they fulfilled all of our responsibilities for us, so we didn't have to. So we learn not to take responsibility because they protected us, they saved us from emotions, they did particular tasks that we should have been doing because maybe it was part of their neediness to be of value, to be supportive, to care about us. And yet again, so that they're of value and that they can be acknowledged and they feel good about themselves. In fact, I remember a young man who was in and out of a number of foster homes, and when he reached the age where he could be independent, he had a mentor who would ring him to wake him up in the morning. He had a mentor that would go and make his bed for him at the age of 17. And he had never learned how to make his bed. Through the people around us being over-responsible, we can learn not to be responsible. Then there are people we grow up around who are over-responsible, who also impose over-responsibility onto us. So they give us responsibilities that tend to be for adults. So basically when we're a child, we're given responsibilities at a young age, and that's not necessarily the age or the stage that we're meant to be actually fulfilling and taking on board those responsibilities. We become over-responsible. We're the ones that go and rescue and save and problem solve and parent adults. And these people were conditioned to be over-responsible, and they conditioned us to do what they did. Or we were raised around people who didn't take responsibility, whom we had to become over-responsible for, and we became over-responsible in our lives. We had to take responsibility for these people because they weren't actually taking responsibility for themselves. They weren't fulfilling their responsibilities. And for our survival, our coping in our environment, we stepped up and did it for them instead. Or we may have been raised by people who were not responsible, whom we learned from their example and became conditioned by them not to take responsibility as well. And we learnt to either be over-responsible or not take responsibility in terms of tasks, people, and even ourselves. So in human form, as I've shared in previous episodes, we have the opportunity to learn about what is natural to us as a soul through the dualities and extremes of responsibility. Because how can we recognize the pure state of responsibility that we naturally operate from, where it is the equilibrium that is the perfect state of all responsibility? How can we know that without knowing its difference, without knowing the extremes? We know it as souls because we don't have a reference point of not being responsible, not being self-responsible, because that concept doesn't even exist in soul form. Or rather, concepts don't exist. They exist in human form because we experience the lack of it or an excess of it. And in soul form, self-responsibility, it's the commitment to yourself to own who you are, what you do and say, what you feel and think. It's the commitment to owning you. And in soul form, you are you. You're the true you. You're whole, you're pure, you're limitless. So self-responsibility, as I said, is not a concept of the soul, because as a soul, you are you, and you do right by you, and you do the right thing because of the purity and the goodness and the light that is you. And through that process, accountability is also not a concept, because if accountability is about being answerable to your truth and where you are at with your commitment and ownership of yourself, and also the fulfillment of your responsibilities, well, if you're always fulfilling your responsibilities because that's the right thing to do and it's what you know you are to do, and if you are always self-responsible, then what are you answerable about? Because being answerable and being accountable tends to be a concept that is about when we don't fulfill our responsibilities, or when we take on board other people's responsibilities that aren't ours, that we end up answerable for. Your soul is truth. Your soul is pure, so it never does anything that is not right and good. It has no reason to be answerable because it is whole. So your soul is the embodiment of ownership and acceptance. So if this is who we naturally and truly are, this emphasizes what I said in the previous episodes around self-responsibility and responsibility. And in fact, I believe it was episode 23. Is when you are self-responsible, you are being in your personal power. You are really connecting to your wholeness, to your purity, to your acceptance. You're really connecting and operating from your truth and the complete being who you truly are. And your soul cares and loves unconditionally. There's no space for a lack of responsibility. There's no space for over-responsibility. Because as a soul, you never would impose your experience and process upon another soul. Why? Well, you know the impacts, but you have no reason to or need to. The human processes of blame, justification, avoidance, overcompensation, excuses, lying, denying, rescuing emotionally, parenting adults, irresponsibility, negligence, not taking responsibility, over-responsibility, guilt, consequences, and accountability are such complex, emotionally intertwined processes. Yet responsibility and self-responsibility is so simple in the process and the energy, and it's so natural and powerful. The more you reclaim these natural qualities and states of being, of responsibility and self-responsibility, the easier and more fluid your life is. But in the doing so, it can mean that the souls that are more their human selves that are in your life, they may leave and they may drop out of your life, whether it being through their choice, your choice, or it's naturally a time to move away from each other. It's a time when your soul agreements have reached a place of completion for that stage of your human adventure. And something I've asked many people over the years is how truly willing and how truly committed are you to going to your truth, to your light, and being who you truly are? And many people have said to me immediately, "Oh, totally, yes." And then they process it. Because it can be scary being fully responsible and fully self-responsible. It can be scary to own every single aspect of what you've done, what you say, what you think, what you feel, and who you are. And as I knew when I set out on my adventure of healing and unraveling and my commitment to truly discovering and being me, it was through my willingness and my commitment to myself that I was going to be who I truly am And if that meant people left my life, then that was what was meant to happen. Because no other person was more important than me being me. And if a person left my life, besides our soul agreements being completed, then possibly it was because they weren't ready to go to the level of growth that I was. Possibly it just was that their journey wasn't meant to be with me anymore. And in amongst recognizing that self-responsibility and responsibility are yet again human concepts, and yet something so innate and natural to who we truly are, further questions have arisen for me. If our soul innately and naturally is responsible and self-responsible and operates from truth, and there are no questions, there's no lacking in any way in these areas, then is our soul self responsible for our human self? And especially given the choices we make as souls before coming into our human bodies and having our human experience, then what is our soul self's responsibility or responsibilities to our human self? Which then leads to the question, what is the purpose of the soul self in terms of our human self? And these are questions to be explored in another episode. So take some time over the next week and really reflect on how being self-responsible and fulfilling your responsibilities, when you truly accept them, when you connect to what is natural to you, and you see the beauty and the power of your choices and what you do you feel and experience that natural flow of energy? The ease at which you move through those responsibilities, the ease at which you own who you truly are. And if you haven't pondered on and reflected on that before, take some time in the next week to do so. Take some time to see where you have some room for growth and owning more of who you are, owning more of what you feel, what you think, the choices you make, what you say and what you do, and owning you. And take some time to ponder on where are you fulfilling your responsibilities and where are you not fulfilling your responsibilities. I only have to go for a walk down the road to see the amount of rubbish on the side of the road and to know that people are not fulfilling their responsibilities and they're not even aware they're not. And each time we don't, then we dilute a level of our power, we dilute a level of the connection to what is natural and true within us. Every time we don't own when we were grumpy or had a tone or were tired and didn't want to deal with something, instead of just being transparent and sharing where we're at. Every time we dived in and did something for someone else when they didn't actually ask us or want us to. And then we feel hurt because they're not happy about it. But we're the ones that imposed our process and over responsibility on them. Can you imagine what this world would be like if we were all self-responsible and fulfilling our responsibilities? If we were operating from our soul self in human form, we wouldn't need laws. We wouldn't need rules and guidelines because people would know what the right thing is to do and they would do that. With the care, the love, the honour and the respect that is natural to us. Do subscribe. Do follow me on the IMAD podcast so that you can get notifications of further episodes and support me to share the IMAD adventure with others. And also, if you'd like to explore how you may be being over-responsible in areas for your growth and with whom you're being over-responsible, then check out the free download link below for your copy of the over-responsibility checklist. And until the next episode, cease fighting and controlling and resisting and even running away from responsibility and your self-responsibility. Cease taking responsibility for others. And I know with some of the steps I've taken recently, the deeper and stronger my confidence has become and letting go, the more accepting I've become of the people that I used to take responsibility for. And really accept, embrace and really own your responsibilities and your self-responsibility. Because in doing so, you are owning you and what is totally natural to you and your soul self.